In Pennsylvania, nationalism tends to be associated with good job prospects, getting ahead in the marketing yourself in an application for a position in industry. It's similar to a scene in Fassbinder's movie based on Alfred Doblin's book, set in Berlin in the late 20s, called Berlin Alexanderplatz, which has a moment when anti-fascists surround Bieberkopf, or whatever his name is, in a bar and offer to vie with him in the brawl because of his display of nationalist stripes. And it comes out that Bieberkopf, if that's his name, is Franz Bieberkopf, is just somebody who associates its role in the war and all with its war guilt, but just pragmatism. And after the Vietnam War, we saw American job environments go the direction of the post-war world in Germany, where people just said, I was just doing my national duty because I wanted a good job. And war guilt was smothered in nationalism. This began with Lyndon Johnson replacing JFK, but the Democratic Party has played second fiddle to the Republicans ever since. After Kennedy was done in, these killers added insult to injury by carping about liberals. And the Democrats said, don't worry, we're not JFK. And we'll just argue who's more nationalistic in favor of nationalist posts and jobs. So there's a turnstile ever since between the parties. Where rancid, horrible leaders like Clinton get away with being extremely disturbing, and then they're replaced by even more disturbing people like Donald Trump. Tang phenomenon. Well, that's the beginning, that's the role that Reagan played. If you look, you won't, I don't think it was necessarily overlooked as just people didn't have a chance to see the Zapruder film when The Killers by Reagan was on the market. If Claire Booth Luce hadn't locked away the Zapruder film, The Killers would have come out simultaneously with the Zapruder film, and people would have said, hey, what's this? There's the same thing going on in both movies. I would have as a 4-year-old. by the time Dick Gregory pried the Zapruder film for Dick Cavett out of the hands of Life magazine's safe, and safes played the final role in The Killers, by the way. The movie The Killers was forgotten. And what goes on in the research so-called community is that the alternative rendering, so-called conspiracy buffs, is an involved dossier of issues that are answered differently than the standard conclusions of the Warren Commission. And what people do is they get familiar, like Jim Garrison really had that investigation of Oliver Stone's film. That's in Oliver Stone's film. Oliver Stone's film is more or less historically accurate. It's more or less inaccuracies derived from anything you might dispute about Jim Garrison. But the basic facts are established. Jim Garrison really did do all that, and all that is really rather interesting. And it's one of the material dramas in the dossier of the so-called research community. People get lost in that stuff and master it. They get good at it. They know about the bullet fragments. They know about the forensic details. They know about Oswald's movements, his associations, various allegations, evidence that was destroyed or damaged in police holding, and so on. The next film, the Bronson film, Zapruder film, and so on. They can identify witnesses and find their testimony in the Warren Commission, people who were excluded and things they said afterwards, interviews with them on YouTube. But they don't break ranks enough to actually do their own homework. So there's fireworks display. People like me get banned for bringing up the semiotics in the Zapruder film and its discolored identicality with The Killers by Reagan. So, I'm saying Reagan killed Kennedy, and it's obvious. You're allowed to say, you could say any president killed Kennedy except Reagan. Then they get furious. Because the other people, suspects, didn't really do it. LBJ was probably in on it, but Joe Ford may have been. But you're allowed to talk about Bush. You are not allowed to talk about Reagan. And that's the basic piece of evidence, because he's the one who really did it. Which is obvious. That's all I'm saying. So, how did they get away with it is very interesting. After World War II, the defeated reasserted their power through Hollywood. The defeated were like the Vichy French, who were allies of Japan in Vietnam, suckered America into going into Vietnam. Weirdest movie ever made, John Wayne's Green Berets, opens with a German singing, an American Marine singing in German. Weird. So you get the idea they induced melancholy and patriotic nationalism and war guilt, supplanted with nationalism and jobs and Democrats for Reagan, like that dweeb who ran with Hillary Clinton. Tim something. Another what's his name? And the defeated reasserted their power after World War II through Hollywood, but it was the same gang that reasserted their power after the Civil War. D.W. Griffith made his assistant director in Birth of a Nation, where the Burning Cross was used for the first time by the KKK. That's where the KKK got the idea. Made Reagan's wartime films with Errol Flynn, and those pro-actors. There's a bust of Hitler with the U.S. over the swastika, and it says rather us and Reagan sitting there on the reel of the film. It goes by too fast to see, but if you look at frame by frame, I didn't Photoshop that image. It traces back to the dawn of cinema when Fayoum was a contested sovereignty zone between Habsburg, Croatia, and Italy back in after World War One, when Gabriel D'Annunzio was entertaining Luigi Freddi, the founder of Italian cinema. Mussolini was his close friend, and D.W. Griffith was introduced to Mussolini by this little group of people. And Spansky was writing for the New Age newspaper in 1919 when he talks about the superproduction that went on. It has four elements: the escape of Hitler, the execution of JFK over Hiroshima, Two Virgins Pussy Ball clogged to the AIDS attack, and Lenin's Houdini. Well, people back out with Lenin's Houdini. They say, no, that's not true. But it is true. He was the star player of the whole Dan Rather Oppo World show, that you would rather believe he didn't do it. But it is true. Lenin had the starring role. It's clear from the evidence. And Seattle are nutbags. They say, well, that proves that we were right, even if you graduated with honors from a community college, or you graduated from a community college and are now in Phi Theta Kappa, however you want to put it, in Psi Beta. We were still right about you, and you don't make any sense. You don't have any right to Congress with professionals, and we kept you out of school for 12 years because you're a crackpot. Well, according to Seattle, the Texas school book doesn't even exist. It was written by Gail Carolyn Burson, which is a nom de guerre for Christian Armageddon. Gay illness, Christmas Carolyn bombs bursting. It's like Sin War. It virtually proves that Sin War was working with Nosferatu, who, when they had the rave massacre, which Seattle had a rave massacre, which was committed by a MAGA type. So they would have the pretext. They went on their, Hannibal jamboree, get rid of the kids in the wilderness to buck and nail the supernova rave scene, and then trounce Gaza with this Holocaust that we're supposed to sit on our hands and twiddle our fingers about. And she was one of Nosferatu's favorites. She graduated from Bryn College, this Gail Burson perpetrator. The sandbaggers lined up because Tony Levin is a notorious Jew boy from King Crimson, who said, Leslie Katz didn't like him and we don't like him either, so Leslie Gayo and Les Lyons is a sort of obnoxious thing that goes on in the whole Texas school book. The Texas school book does exist. Despite Seattle's desperate, crazy, weird, abusive, murderous, ripper-hatter terrorism towards me, and their horrible lies and face lies and derision, the Texas school book does in fact exist. You can read it. It's in texasschoolbook.weebly.com. Those are necessary and sufficient pages. There's more of it. You can include, in fact, that I got a letter from Martha Gellhorn if you want. It was Eleanor Roosevelt's best friend. It is an abrasive Zionist Hollywood parable. It's like, but it shows you the contraption. Like Martha Gellhorn is played by Ingmar Bergman For Whom the Bell Tolls. She came from Joseph Goebbels' cinema, the IGA studios or whatever it is. And you even have her in the film said Og or Lenin's Houdini, at least one of them. You also have Cliff Robertson as a good example of how they operate. The cinema biographies do the same labyrinthian retelling of the story that their personal biographies do. The symbol for the underground in Casablanca is a double cross. Cliff Robertson played at JFK and PT 109. He also went above the World Trade Center in a private plane, circled it to watch on 911. He also starred in, remember, We Now Take Control of Your Television Sets, The Outer Limits, starred in the premiere episode of The Outer Limits, which was delayed for Kennedy's state funeral. Dan Rather, which is an index, What You Would Rather Believe, says Kennedy's head went violently forward, the exact opposite of what he saw in the movie. But what you would rather believe. You would rather believe